I'll give you a climate science hypothesis you've never heard before, and I will sell this to you with at least as much certainty as any of the other hypotheses, which means not very good. All right, here we go. You know, regular readers of my blog and followers of my Periscope, that I sometimes talk about philosopher Nick Bostrom's idea that we are a computer simulation, literally just a software simulated world created by some civilization of, let's say, humans who learned how to make simulations, and they made characters who live their lives in the simulation believing they are real. Now, the reason this thought is compelling is because the reason this is compelling is that, I'm sorry, messages are coming in, I have to make them go away. The reason this is compelling is that for every civilization that learns how to make a simulated world that believes it's real, and our civilization is right there, you know, we're right on the cusp of being able to create a simulated world where the characters act and think and believe that they're real. I'm sure we'll do that in my lifetime at least. So if that's the case, then here's the fun part. I have teased in the past that you could determine whether we live in a simulated world or a real one, whether we're an original species that just evolved in the normal organic way, or we're one of the what could be infinite copies that are simulations, that there actually is a way to tell. So you would look for ways that a programmer would program this world for the tells. You know, you'd look for the little, you know, hidden tags and the seams and the seams in the reality, metaphorically speaking, seams. Now, some of the things you'd look for is that you can never find what your world is made of, like what's the stuff you're made of, because if you're simulated, you're not made of anything real, right? And sure enough, when physicists burrow down into the tiniest of little things, all you get is probability. You know, we're not really made of anything. We're not made of anything. There's just probability, and you know, waves and particles may be there, but only until you look. The other thing you'd look for is that for resource constraint reasons, you would not create a simulated world with a real history, because it would be infinite and take up all your computing resources. Instead, what you do is create creatures that have cognitive dissonance on a regular basis, so that as they discover things in the present that require a history to understand them, the history is created when needed. So in other words, if we're simulated, history is created on demand. And it turns out that the physicists have determined that's actually what happens. That the reality doesn't really exist until somebody observes it. In other words, our history, we already know this. It's proven. The physicists can demonstrate that it's not until the observation that you know what was happening in the past. All right. So those are the first little clues that were more likely. Oh, and the other clue would be you would also create your simulation so you couldn't get out of it. And right now we have that constraint in the laws of physics, because the universe is presumably expanding at the speed of light, because the light itself becomes part of the universe that's expanding. So you can't ever get to the edge of the universe because it's already moving at the speed of light, and a rule of physics is that you can't move faster than the speed of light. So you can never get to the edge to look back on it and say, okay, now that I'm on the outside, I see that this isn't what I thought it was. All right, now let's talk about climate science. This is where I was going to on this. If we're a simulation, imagine you're the creator of the simulation, and you have a couple of ways to go to create your simulation. You're first going to make sure that you create a world that is compatible with the life of the creatures you're putting in the simulation. So far, so good. Now, that doesn't prove anything, because evolution, as we understand it, would get us to the same place. But if we were evolved to this place, and we just got lucky that we happened to be the the ones, the one thing that was involving in a place where the conditions were right. But of course, there's a survivor bias, right? The only people who get to ask the questions, like me, are the people who evolved in the lucky way where all the conditions and physics were just right for me to survive. But chances are that would happen to somebody, maybe more than some. So just the fact that we exist in this perfectly balanced environment, that's not enough to tell you we're simulated or real, because we could get there either way. But here's the dangerous idea. And by the way, I'm totally cognizant of the fact that somebody's going to take this out of context and further destroy my reputation as a crazy person. But here's the idea: if we're a simulation, and you're the programmer, and it's your job to build the simulation, would you build a world in which the simulations, the creatures that you put in it, could be all destroyed by the world just going to hell? Like the sun exploding, for example. Would you build a simulation in which the sun could explode and just wipe out all of your creatures? Would you build a simulation where they had a good run for a couple hundred years on the Earth, and then the ecosystem just all went to hell and it killed everybody? Would you build that simulation? As a programmer, you probably wouldn't, because it'd be so much work to make this thing that just kills all its creatures. What would be the point of that? Yeah, but you're right. But maybe. You can't say that you would never do that, and maybe it would just be a mistake. But here's the dangerous part of this. If we're a software simulation, I think more likely than not, no guarantees to this, but more likely than not, one of the tells, and not a confirmation by itself, just something you'd see as part of your total evidence, one of the tells would be a self-correcting environment. Right? Think about this. Well, I'll just put the question to you. Let's say you're the creator of the simulation. You have all the skills to create a world which is stable, and then you're going to put creatures in it, and they're going to involve and interact and stuff. Would you as a creator, and this is an actual question, so answer this question. If you were that creator, would you build into it the ability for the natural environment to just sort of go haywire and kill all the people? Or would you make sure that's the one thing that didn't happen? You just build into your code, well, if things get out of balance, rebalance them. Because things are always getting out of balance, right? The atmosphere is always getting out of balance. So wouldn't you add in a little bit of code that says, check the balance once in a while. If you're getting out of balance in this way, maybe you need to add a little over here, subtract a little over here. I was thinking about this because I just saw an article somebody sent me that those big gigantic continents of plastic that we think is floating in the ocean are maybe 1/10 or 1/100th what it should be. I don't know how they determine what it should be, so I guess there's some credibility question there. But apparently we thought the oceans were just filled with miles and miles and gigantic plastic floating garbage things, and there's some of that, too much, but not nearly as much as we thought. And part of the reason that people are thinking it's not what we thought is apparently some microbes. This is not confirmed, but apparently some microbes have evolved to eat the plastic. Now, is it like the BP spill? Good example, right? The BP spill was supposed to be, a scale of 1 to 10, it was supposed to be a 10. If you look back at it 100 years from now, you'd say, well, in the big scheme of things, it was closer to a 1. It was terrible while it happened, but in the scheme of things, it didn't last very long, and nature corrected. The microbes adapted so quickly that they just fixed it. Likewise, I saw an article today that said one possible problem with the climate models, and everybody has heard this before, that when you increase the CO2, you're also increasing the vegetation because CO2 is a good fertilizer. And And so it's a natural rebalancing mechanism that CO2 makes it hotter, but it also makes more plants. And there's some, not enough to necessarily compensate, but you can see that there's two different variables that interact to balance each other out. Now, probably there are all kinds of those variables all through our environment. So the tell for being a simulated world, no guarantees, right? Just it would just feel like that's what it was. Is if you saw the world, our environment, continually adapting to keep us alive in ways that we didn't anticipate. Now, if you see that, I would say that's a sign of a simulated universe. Nuclear can be balanced. Yeah, more heating, more clouds. Clouds cool. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, the reason I label this the most dangerous hypothesis about climate science is I would not want to encourage anybody to suggest we get out of the Paris Accords because we're a simulated universe. So keep it in context that this is just for fun. This is not for science, and this is not for politics. But if you're looking to find out if you're a simulated world, I would say that all the evidence is starting to line up in one direction. Okay? Where can we read about reality not being real until the observer sees it? Well, that's standard physics. And is that Bell's theorem? What's the name of the scientific principle in which you can see that observation? Look up the double slit experiment. Yeah, the double slit experiment, and then Schrodinger's cat. Yeah, so if you're just entering the world of weird physics, look up Schrodinger's cat, Heisenberg uncertainty, and the double string experiment, and the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics. Yeah.